Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. I'm Sheryl Litzar, happy to be your host this morning, joined by Fern Schellinger, our networking expert. We are happy to answer your job search questions. I know we're all regulars here, small crowd, but we are here to help. So who would like to kick us off with a job search question, a tip, a best practice, a thought, anything that we can discuss together?
Should you ever take a job that you have a gut reaction isn't a good fit? Or can you take it and say, I'll give it a year. I'll promise I'll be there a year. Say to myself and say, I will be there a year before I will start looking.
Okay, so here's a good rule of thumb. I've advised people like this for years when I think of it, and I'm thinking of it right now. Scale of 1 to 10, okay? 10 is, this is a fantastic, amazing, gotta have a job. 1 is not on your life, okay? If you rate this job anything less than an 8, you have too much of a hesitation. And only rated an 8, in other words, only take the job if that's an 8, if you're the kind of person who just doesn't give anything a 9 or a 10, okay? It really should be a 9 or 10 or a 12. Because just like, you know, when you meet somebody, relationship, oh, there's a honeymoon, whatever, but then people, you know, everybody's becomes themselves. The job ends up happening that way too, because whatever halo effect we have when we go in, the shine's going to wear off and it's just going to become a job. So if you already have hesitations going in, chances are it's going to be a lot more of the same, or maybe more other stuff than what you realized. And you don't want, and besides, you don't want to be job hopping. And you know, if you can commit to a year, but you might be kind of miserable, and then they're not going to be happy either, right? You want something that's going to be right for you and right for them. Not that there's any job that's perfect, but you want to have a good sense, you know, like, yeah, this feels right, you know, and God will show you too, you know, because if you're getting a sense that things aren't right, it might be the Lord telling you, this isn't the right one for you. So listen to that. Listen to him.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions?
Well, a little bit more of a comment. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I guess I know one of the things I've been struggling with somewhat is patience, and patience pays off. Because I got a call from a organization I applied for a job for, gosh, I guess it was the beginning of December. And just radio silence, nothing. And I just had a phone screen with them yesterday that went really, really well.
Yeah.
So, and the recruiter just kept saying, she said, I'm so glad I went back and looked at my resumes that came in, because there was an interruption in her responsibilities.
Right.
So that's why there
right.
was just kind of like this stoppage of activity.
That's right.
And then she said, I'm so glad I went back. She said, because you just have a lot of what we're looking for. So, you know, we shall see what happens. And I don't know if I shared this with you guys. I had 2 companies I had applied, hadn't heard anything. As a bit of advice from Bob Kay, he was like, you know, do something bold. So I actually took my resume and cover letter to their office and walked it in and handed it to someone. So one of those companies that called me back, that's one of the companies I did that.
That's different.
So, you know, and in both cases, there were people in the office.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you got to try something a little different.
Yeah. Well, and that's just another example of what Sheryl and I say all the time. You just never know what's going on behind the scenes with the company, and there could be a million different reasons. And so, you know, in this case, her responsibilities got shifted and she could no longer do any recruiting or whatever it was.
Whatever. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I had it happen. So I just picked up a search, and somebody had applied to, before I got the search, somebody had applied to this organization on their website. I don't even think that they had the job. I don't know, but somebody just applied, right? And then once I actually started working on it, the employer, you know, gave me the resume. I have no idea how long that resume was sitting there before I got the search. Okay. And yes, I reached out to the person, but as far as they're concerned, it might have just gone into a black hole. Okay. But they had no idea that this employer was going to hire me to do this, right? So you just don't know what is going on, whether it's responsibilities changed, something got lost in cyberspace, it gets passed off, somebody quits their job, they're no longer, they get a new recruiter. Like Vern said, a million reasons. Things change. They really do. So yeah,
And
patience
all
is
you,
important.
all you can do as the job seeker is just keep pushing forward, keep
And-
looking for opportunities,
and-
keep networking.
And by the way, not for nothing, more than one search that I've been doing recently, I decided to actually, I don't normally post a job on LinkedIn, but I'm like, why not? I just did it. And in both cases, I had individuals who, looked at the job announcement where it said, apply to me, even though you could apply through LinkedIn, but I also had apply to me. There were several candidates who took the initiative. They applied on LinkedIn and they emailed me. That said they were interested. I'm like, okay, this is a serious candidate. They went out of their way. And not only that, they did the cover letter, they gave a writing sample, they gave a thoughtful, they really went the extra mile, which said to me, this is someone I really need to pay attention to. So, on top of which, like we always talk about, if you can get an internal champion to flag your candidacy, that's even better. All right, somebody in the organization that can just wave it in front of the hiring manager or the recruiter or the HR person. Anything you can do, multiple touches can be very helpful. That shows that you're serious, because otherwise, if you just apply online, you're one of 100 resumes. I posted this one job over the weekend, and within 24 hours, I got 173 responses. I literally had to close the search. And part of why I got so many responses, I think, is because it was a remote job. I've been pushing my employers to go remote, as opposed to the second job that I posted, which was local. I got 7 so far in like several days, that's just the way of the world now. So especially if you're applying to remote jobs, you can presume that a ton of people are going to be applying. A lot more competition with the remote stuff now. Yeah. So it takes time for people to get back because, they got all kinds of stuff going on and they might have a lot of candidates to choose from.
Yeah, I got an email back from an employer. I submitted my application or my resume. They had me do a writing sample. They said they chose the first group. They said if they do not find somebody in the first group, they will contact me. So I'm just going to let it go and move on. If they contact me, there's nothing else I can do.
Yeah, you never know. By the way, if an employer puts an amount on if they post a salary on the job description, which more people are doing these days, and they post one number, it is possible that they will go above that number. It is possible, but take them at their word. Vet the position based on that number. If you can live with that number. If you can't live with that number, don't apply. If you can live with that number, you want a little bit more, you can certainly ask them, at the end or whenever, hey, is there any flexibility here? But otherwise, they're trying to be honest and truthful. So, because it just happened to me where I did that. Because I'm of that mindset now, just post the number, not 2 numbers, just 1, to let people know this is what we are. And as it happens in this case, it actually is the top, because it's the salary is not particularly competitive. So I pushed the employer to go as high as they could, which is still kind of low. And we had somebody apply who was fantastic. And at the end, when we talked about the money, he's like, well, he goes, I'm actually looking for, and then he mentions like $20,000 more. I'm like, he goes, well, I thought, maybe there would be some flexibility. And I'm like, well, first of all, even if there was, that's a lot. I didn't say that, but, so I want to encourage you, please, make sure that when you see that number, only apply if you feel like it's a number that you can live with. Lee, welcome. Lee is new to our group. He was referred by another coaching colleague, Shelley.
Thank you.
So Lee, the way that we run this group is it's an open Q&A. So any job seeker question that you have, we are happy to help. Myself and Vern Schellinger here. We're both career coaches and Vern has an HR background. I'm a recruiter as well. So we are, versed in all the things of the job seekers need. So feel free to share. In fact, if you'd like to take the floor, if you have any particular questions that you'd like to pose to the group, we're happy to help.
So I'm interviewing next week for a position, and it's rather unusual in that a requirement is that they expect, it's a trade association leadership position, they expect to have the new leader be able to increase the industry market share. This isn't the end sellers, the providers. This is the trade association actually growing the market share.
When you say growing the market share, meaning that the association needs, it's not about expanding their membership base. You're saying that they want
Correct.
they want to have the industry expand. Wow, that's
Yeah.
tough.
So if we'll just a fake example, but if we're the National Towel Association,
Yeah.
we want the association to grow the use of towels internationally. And the recruiting firm said this is very unusual, but we're starting to see it pop up a little bit more. They're not concerned about membership. They think that'll come if you grow market share. And I said, okay, how far out of the box are you going to let me go? You know,
My goodness.
is really, you know, something like that requires super out of the box thinking and a big cache of money to go try things, and then the willingness to allow you
It's
to
literally
fail.
asking you guys to have a go-to-market strategy as if you were a for-profit corporation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
unusual.
Yeah.
Very unusual. Well,
No.
yeah, I wish I mean, like you and I could probably have a private chat about that because I'm an
Okay.
association recruiter. So, you know,
Yeah.
but I I don't know what else to say on this public forum, but other than that's a big lift. And
Yeah.
certainly-
Yeah.
Other than if you can do that, you actually are creating tremendous value for your members.
Come on.
Well, that's the upside. If you do that,
Yeah.
you can pretty much write your own ticket, you know, for your
Yeah.
next position, because you will have
That's
really
incredible.
moved a mountain.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. But lots of challenges there.
Mhm.
How many members do you know in this?
I think they have around 400 or so.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's a national association that represents you know, a pretty to them, it's going to be a pretty big sector. I'm used to working in much wider fields. So my last position, I represented the manufacturers in the state of Kentucky. So anybody that made or altered something in it from its previous state. So you can imagine that's a very wide sort of purview. This is very singular, but it's national. So it's, you know, bigger scale, but smaller slice of the pie kind of a thing. But
Interesting.
that to me is the most interesting thing they brought up so far. And I'm really curious to see what their real world expectations of that are.
Yeah. Those, and so in thinking about that, Lee, certainly, you know, start to prepare your questions.
Mhm.
You know, I'd have lots of questions.
Absolutely. And not only that, but ideas. You know, these groups are definitely, and this is a tip for everybody on this call, regardless of what your level is. Okay. Questions are fantastic. Ideas are even better. And when I say ideas, I'm not talking about presumptuous ideas. I'm not talking about this is what I will do, but I'm talking about being humbly confident, right?
Yeah.
Where you take a strategic approach. And I'm telling you, whatever level you are at, it doesn't matter. Employers are looking for innovation. They're looking for strategic ideas. And your ability to connect the dots in advance, and certainly even on the spot, you know, when you're talking to the employer, as you're hearing, right, about the needs and the challenges and the opportunities, saying, well, have you ever thought about,
Yeah.
might we consider,
Mhm.
would this be an option? How do you think stakeholders would respond to this? Those kinds of questions. So you're proffering an idea, but you're framing it as a question. You're
Mhm.
framing it as an opportunity. And then, and again, it's not presumptuous. So you're saying, I was just thinking, have you ever tried this? Has this ever worked? Have you ever pursued this market? Have you ever, could we, how about those phrases work really, really well? And it shows people that you're thinking critically, you're intellectually curious, you're an idea generator. Truly, but a receptionist can do this, okay? Anybody can do this. A CEO to everybody, because it's all about improving the life of this organization, whoever you are. So be thinking about that. Don't just be thinking that executives need to do this. Okay. I've seen it work very, very well.
Yeah. And in doing so, you're in the interview, you're presenting yourself as someone, who's got ideas, who's thinking about adding value, from the standpoint of just learning about the job. Think about someone who asks those types of questions that Shira just asked versus someone who doesn't ask those questions. And I'm the recruiter now. Who do you think I'm going to, lean towards, certainly in terms of the offer?
I'll give you an example. So when I'm in my recruiter role, I'm of regular practice to have all of my candidates, well, when it makes sense, I should say this, when it makes sense, to do a presentation, okay, to the employer, okay, if that makes sense in the search, and certainly for executive levels, I always do that. And I recall this one time years ago, it was the search was for a vice president of education, I think it was something like that, for vice president fundraising. Anyway, it was a VP level for an educational association. Anyway, because it was an educational association, we had, of the candidates that we had, several of them, not just one, several of them had PhDs. Okay, so these are really highly academically qualified people. And there was this one candidate who only had his bachelor's, right, relative to the PhDs. Fantastic candidate. I had all of them do a presentation. This person, he went the mile, and he proffered ideas, quoted the CEO of the organization. I mean, did a beautiful, bound presentation, the whole thing. The HR person could not call me fast enough after that interview and said he's hired. Beat out the PhDs, beat out everybody had more experience. He was the least experienced, but had the most wherewithal, right? And as it turns out, he was such a great person, great candidate. 2 weeks after he got hired, he sent me this, a magazine cover, and I think it was Ebony magazine, for the top 40 under 40 leaders. He made it to the cover. He was that much of a rock star. And so just to show you, go the extra mile, figure out ways that you can set yourself apart, bring ideas, bring innovation, do what you can to stand out from the crowd if you really want the role. So thanks for that, Lee. All right, other questions?
When you see job postings, there's a certain amount of information you can get from a company's website, but where are the best places to look for reviews of the company in terms of, other than like how long they've been in business, whether it's a secure job, whether it's just sort of some opportunity that's come up, but it doesn't have longevity other than asking in an interview. So, screening jobs that, you get a bazillion job opportunities to apply for. And I'm just clicking and trying to compare, oh, this has 500, this has 1,000 employees. This has been founded in 2002. This one's founded last year, that kind of information you can get. But other than that.
Well, so first of all, you have to think about what are you looking for? What information are you trying to suss out, and why? Here's the kind of framing of that. And then I definitely would love to hear your response. And this is sort of for everybody, right? Because when you ask the question, I'm thinking about everybody's thinking about this for themselves. Like, how do you vet opportunities? Look, understand that on the one hand, no matter what information you find out, that may belie what's actually going on internally. Sure. It could be the glitziest website. They could have been in business for the last 100 years. Their CEO could be there for 32 years. They could look stable. And then you come inside and it's a hot mess, right? Or the other way around. Maybe you can't find out, maybe they're a new company and you can't find out much about them. And there's no reviews anywhere. And maybe they're fabulous to work for, right? And then on top of which, every culture is different. Every team is different. On top of that, people turn over a lot, right? So the supervisor who may not have been so great to work for and everybody started turning over because they were in the role, they leave and all of a sudden they get somebody new who's fabulous. But you would never know that because when you do your research, no one's going to say that kind of thing, right? So that's why I'm asking about what's your why and what are you looking for? Because at the end of the day, you are a unique person. They're a unique organization. The people are the organization and the people are constantly changing. Cultures change, things change. So I'm not saying it's bad to research. I mean, feel free to, but I wouldn't put a ton of stock in a lot of what you read because
Mhm.
things are just changing constantly. I mean, but that said, there are some things that are consistent. Like I've regularly talked about Amazon in this call. And Amazon has, we know, a very, very, very demanding culture. That's their culture. Like it just is what it be, right? No matter where you go, what department it is. So you can do research on them and you'll just sort of know, okay, I either want this or I don't. Does that make sense? So there is some reasoning for it, but sometimes it can be just a little bit deceiving. Before you go on, Sonia, do you want to clarify?
So there are two things. I mean, one is the environment, which obviously a lot of times you won't get until you actually start the job.
Right.
You know, even if you hear things from LinkedIn members who are part of the organization, you know, you don't know whether someone's just a complainer or whatnot.
Right.
But then there is the other part, which is the job I'm applying for going to be restructured? You know, because every year or every 6 months they're restructuring and they can't seem to sort of keep a position for long enough. I just don't want to be in a position where, you know, I'm applying for something and, you know, 6 months later or 3 months later, I'm moving.
Well,
So-
so here's the thing with that. Of course, no one wants that. At the same time, we are in such a period of flux now. And I don't just mean COVID, I just mean in general.
Sure.
Organizations are constantly reevaluating now. There is no such thing as stability in like any sense of the term.
Sure.
It's fluid, right? So to the extent that you can have a fluid mindset, not a
Mhm.
stability mindset, you're going to be setting yourself up more for success mentally, right?
Okay.
Because that's the other thing too, is even if the job didn't change, you're going to change. Your
Right.
responsibilities are going to change. The organization is going to change. The clients are going to change. Things are going to shift. Things are going to move. So that there is always flux regardless, even if the job stays the same. So again, reevaluate your why, because of course, okay, you're not going to want a job that's just flat, right? You want some
No, I
challenge, you want some
understand that.
growth.
I understand. It's just the types of jobs that I've had have been extremely stable and they have growth within your field,
Yeah,
but the job itself doesn't get moved to a different department or sound like something entirely different.
yeah,
And so, you know, I mean, most of my jobs I've kept for at least 10 years, if not more.
sure. I get you. Yeah, these days,
Not so much, huh?
not so much, not so much. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible. I mean, there are plenty of jobs that are more stable, but I'd say the assumption right now is
Mhm.
more change than less. Sonia, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm on Kenya's. Is it Kenya? Is that
Kaya.
Kaya?
Kaya. And I
I'm
took
on her
that.
side.
I used to have a phonetic spelling next to my name, but people still kept getting it wrong. So I don't really know
All right.
if there's a
Kaya.
way to phonetically spell it where it'll actually helps people.
I'm on her side with that. I do research. It's easier with nonprofits because you got GuideStar. So you can go in there and you can see a trail, you know, as to how they have produced. But for profits, I have been through corporate bankruptcy. Oh, it's heartbreaking. And I did that where I went to a company that I was recommended for. And the COO contacted me. I talked to him. I took the job in the middle of December. And by April, I was gone because their financials were not stable. Anytime, first of all, they didn't have an in-house CFO. If I had known that, I would have had enough knowledge to question it. But when the CFO came to me and said, don't hire anybody else, I'm like, okay, we understand. But what sealed the deal for me, we missed the payroll. And I'm like, I can't do that no more. And of course, you know, when we missed the payroll, you know who got all the phone calls. And so I do that. I go in, I try to find anything. If they have financials posted, like if it's for profit, they have their annuals, I go through the financial report. I check everything because I don't want to get a job and like I say, no, like Kia said, it's, you know, 3 months later. I mean, it broke my heart, but I didn't have a choice. I thought it was a stable company. It was a GovCon. You know, one thing about GovCons, you know, that the government pays their bills. You don't have to worry about that. They pay their bills. And so I'm thinking I got something stable, but they were in the middle of, what do you call it when you and somebody else contract to the same job and there's a discrepancy and everything's put on hold. And at that point, no money's coming in. You just do what's on the outside. And like I said, it was not a good situation. It was very stressful for me because I knew what was going on. Employees did not know what was going on. I could not tell them. And like I said, I do have a life too. You know, I need to be paid also. And it was a terrible situation. So like I say, I do the same. I check everything. I looked at the leadership, see if I know anybody, if they got the board of directors, I look at them. I do a thorough check because I don't want to get in there and then find out. I mean, I know the culture. You don't know that till you get in. That's like getting married. You never know what you got till you get them. But as far as that, you know, you could work with the culture, you know, just be professional. And but the finances, if it's going under slowly but surely, oh, it's so painful.
You know, and
like
it depends also, Sonia, what kind of role you're taking, you know. I will tell you that especially for folks who are in marketing or sales, business development, membership, if it's an association, they have an opportunity to help improve the financial position of that organization. In fact, you never know if the money's on a decline. Look, it's not that that's hidden from the organization. They know what's going on, and if they're smart, they're going to be hiring those people to uptick. So even if the financials didn't look so great in the past, doesn't mean that they're not rectifying it. In fact, I did an executive director search last year where that actually was the case. Financials were right, and that was part of the search, was somebody who can grow revenues. Okay, so again, just past-based history does not always indicate the future of the organization. Just so it's like, look at it, evaluate it, but take some of it with a grain of salt because you never know what the future is going to hold, right? And how they're trying to make it better.
Okay.
What type of bankruptcy did your company go through? Was Chapter 11 or what? Chapter 8 or?
It was 11.
Okay. So that means the company's still in business?
They end up selling it out of bankruptcy. It went into bankruptcy. They sold it. The purpose was to get into bankruptcy, leave the debt there, and just take the assets. And that's what they did.
Kaya, the other thing in terms of research is to, if you can find people who do work there, used to work there, they're a good source of information, but even that information, as Shira said, things change all the time. So there's no way that any of us will ever apply for any job and know 100% certainty that when I take this job, everything's going to be smooth and I'll be there for 10 years. There's just no way that any of us would ever know that, because things they simply change. But I would agree with everything Sonia said. Do as much research as you can, get as much information as you can, and make you're making a decision. If they make you the offer, yes or no, you can say no to it if it doesn't sound right to you.
Well, Vern, that's a question I ask in my interview if I'm interested. Let me stress that. If I get to the point I like the company, I'm like, oh, I want to get in here. I do ask, are you looking at anybody for an M&A? Is anybody looking at you? Because I give you a chance to, put it on the table. I'm not afraid of a challenge. I've gone through M&A and so forth on both sides, where we're being acquired, where we are acquiring. It's a fun time to me. But But the thing about, I want to know what I'm getting into, because I feel like I have a lot to bring to the table as far as that's concerned. I love growth, and but I can do consolidation for right siding too. So I just want to know what I'm getting into. So I do. I ask the hard questions, and I think because nobody expect that from HR, they look at me a little. A lot of people don't know. When I talk to the recruiters, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So I have to wait till I get to the hiring manager, and then I can get a little bit more information. But I'm on Kia side. I need to know.
It's Kaya.
Kaya, I'm gonna get it, Kaya.
How do you find the company's financial reports? You mentioned that, Sonia.
If they are publicly traded, it's public knowledge. You can, a lot of times people put it on their website. And if they put it on their website, I go in there. A lot of public companies, they do that. There's different ways. Just Google it. Say, public records for financial records for the ABC company, and something should come up to give you guidance. You have to do your research, and Google and we are very close. And so,
But if it's a privately held company, you can't. Is that right?
no, you can't.
Yeah.
No, that's how come you have to ask the questions in the interview. I want to know what's your revenue, what's your goal for what's this 2022? At the end of the 2022, what does success look like? I want to know. Am I asking too many hard questions for HR? I don't know.
Well, it is interesting because it's funny with the thing about questions, right? In an interview, and you know this, Sonia, because you're in HR and you've been on the other side of interviewing. There are questions that whatever kind of questions you ask indicate something about who you are as a professional. Okay, employers are listening for that. What you ask, how many questions, how deep the questions, how strategic, how in the weeds, how whatever. They're evaluating you based on your questions. So if you want them to know that that's the kind of person you are, Sonia, that you are inquisitive and you're deep and you're gonna be like a forensic analyst, if you will, in your job, then ask all of those questions. Like, it's truth in advertising. If you're not that kind of person, then don't ask those kinds of questions, right? Like, you just ask questions that make sense to show them how you show up.
Yeah.
That's important.
I agree with what you're saying, Shara, because I'm at the table. I have been on the executive team, and we're looking for a new line of revenue and going through strategy, how to make it happen, so on and so forth. I've had signature responsibility for the organization, all the things that the CFO have had. I've partnered with everybody. So I do ask those questions because I've been at that level. But I do think sometimes in my interview, if I have to gauge it, because sometimes I think it overwhelms them and it frightens them.
Look, Sonia, not for nothing. It very well may. Let's just get real with that.
I know.
It very well may. Then you need then that's something that you need to pull back on, right? To make sure that you are being yourself, but also not overwhelming.
I went through that with my, my colleagues at my other HR network group, and they told me, Sonia, you need to dumb it down.
It's like having a first date. Okay, you don't share your whole life story. So I'm making an analogy, not saying you don't share your whole life story in the first date. You're appropriate, right? You share a little. This is where I was raised. Here's siblings, blah blah. You keep it light. You keep it top level. Yeah. The more you get to know them, the more you can gradually, right? Let yourself. Same thing with their interviews, Sonia. I would really encourage you to be thinking about what if walk a mile in their shoes. If you were them, what would you feel is appropriate? Okay, like back pre-pandemic when I used to meet people in person. I used to have some candidates who were particularly vivacious, right? High energy out. And some of those people will get a little bit too comfortable in the interview. And I kind of knew if they were that comfortable in the interview, oh my goodness, what were they going to be like on the job? Okay, because everybody's a little bit more reserved, and that's appropriate to be a little bit reserved on the interview. You let yourself go too much, they're going to think, oh, you're going to be that much more. So I think the advice that you've been getting is right on.
Yeah.
Just
And
make
I
yourself
have
back
been,
up.
I've been getting more interviews. I don't get deep like that anymore. I have to remember what they're looking for.
You can always go,
I'm-
and here, by the way, and let me just finish up with this. Ask questions that you need to know the answer to in order to take the job.
That's
If you
right.
don't need to know, consider whether you need to ask it. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask it, but if you've got 25 questions, don't ask all 25 questions. Ask the ones that are important to you for you to make a good decision. Now, there are other questions that may not have anything to do with your decision, but you're just trying to let them know that you're intellectually curious, that you're a strategic thinker. Those are different kinds of questions. Those are ones that are actually almost proving your qualifications. But as far as the ones that you're really asking because you want to know, ask the ones that are make or breaker.
Yeah.
There are some questions that you can save for when you get the job. If it
Yes,
doesn't
you're
matter
right.
to you,
You're right.
wait,
I have
just
pulled
wait.
back.
Wait on them.
I have pulled back because of that, because I know they're not expecting, first of all, that to come from HR. If I was the CFO, yeah, they would expect that, but they're not expecting that to come from HR. But I partner with the CFO, so I know the language. So,
Yeah.
All right, I'll stay in my lane.
No worries. Kimberly?
I was just going to add to the whole question thing real quickly. It's really beneficial to have your questions listed out. A couple of interviews I had, that was one of the things when I got feedback. I didn't get the offer, but when I got feedback, that was one of the things that was pointed out, that I asked very good questions. For me, culture is huge. And part of it is because of what I do. I'm learning and development. So it's important for me to know the culture, to have an idea of how the company feels or the employees feel about learning and development. Because in some cases, people look at learning and development as, okay, I got to do this. I got to take this class, opposed to having an idea of it really helping you grow. So I throw people off sometimes. It's a simple question, but I've people kind of going like, and I ask them, what do you like about working for the company? And I've had a couple people like, oh, wow, that's a great question. And in some cases, I got some honest answers, and another question is, what does a typical day look like? I just had an interview on Wednesday. It was a panel interview. Oh my gosh, that was the first time I had a question where I was given a time. They asked me a question and said, you have 1 minute to answer. I was like, okay, yeah, it's interesting. It was with one of the branches of DC government. So it's like, okay. But at any rate, when I asked the question, what does a typical day look like? I get honest answers, which is good. And I've gotten everything from, oh, well, you would do this, this, and this, to, you know what? It could be anything. And I like the honesty.
You know what, along those lines, you could also ask if the person, if they can almost percentile the responsibilities, because if you look down that job description list, not every bullet is equally weighted. Say, what is the majority of time? If you can percentile it roughly, is it 30% this? Is it 50% that? Where will I be spending most of my time doing what? That's going to give you a really good sense of things, because I will tell you that as a job seeker, it's very common to scan down a job announcement and do what I call bullet number 5 syndrome. What does that mean? Well, that means that you kind of have a halo effect, like a little, a halo over, I'm calling it bullet number 5. That one bullet that you're like, oh, that's my job, that's my job, that's the job. And you kind of gloss over everything else unknowingly. And it may be that bullet number 5 is only 10% of the job, right? You got to look at what's realistic.
I have seen lately some jobs where they actually do have the percentages next to those bullet points.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen that recently,
that
which
does
is
happen.
extremely helpful.
It does
Because
happen.
then you know, okay, I can zone in on this, or wow, okay, that's what I do, and great, it's 50% of the job, you know, so,
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks. All
thank
right.
you.
Ty?
One thing I do in vetting a company, I want to look at tenures, and I don't know. I try. If it's a smaller organization, a lot of times you can go to their website and it'll say this person joined our organization at date. Look and try to get a sense of, how long do people stay there. I know that some people say it's like 24 months that people, or 26 months that people stay at a job. I don't know if that's a fair measure or not.
These days it isn't, because people change jobs frequently. In fact, I will tell you that typically for younger generations, it's very, very common and actually socially expected to move pretty frequently. In fact, there are some people who will actually say amongst their peer group, wow, you've stayed at that job for 3 years? That's forever. You need to move, that kind of thing. So we're seeing more turnover, particularly with earlier career professionals. It's just a generational thing. It just happens that way. I've
That's good
seen
to
as the
know.
generations have gotten younger, right? They
Because-
used to be like the World War II generation. They stayed forever, got their gold watch, right? Boomers tended to stay on average for 14 years. Gen Xers tended to stay for, 7, 8, like every generation tends to be a little bit less. So I wouldn't put any stock in that. Besides which, look, nobody is sticky anymore. There's no pension plans. There's no reason for people to hang around. And I will tell you too, that even for executives, okay, there is still, in fact, Lee, because I work with, your colleagues a lot, association executives, I found that once they get to a certain point, around 7 years, there's this feeling of, oh, am I dead weight? Should I be looking? Is it too long? Am I going to, and then so we've actually flipped the other way. The 10 years, the 15, the 20, the 25 years, people are feeling is too long. So now there's this feeling of, oh, I've got to move in order to look like I'm keeping my skills fresh and not, hanging around too long and all of that. So we're just in a different social.
I've heard 3 to 7 years for a long time, and 5 years is kind of the sweet spot because you tend to lose your newness and your power of persuasion sometimes. But the newness thing for sure, if you're doing transformational leadership, people have only a certain amount of capacity to absorb that. At least in my experience, then
Pop
it's
off.
time to go find somewhere else to transform.
Yeah. Karen?
I have to agree with Ty. I look at people with tenure in a company because I work in technology, and technology companies get acquired. You get thrown out of your job quite frequently. But I do look for companies that have like some sort of stability, and tenure is one of the things I look at.
Okay. Yeah, everybody's got different criteria, whatever is right for you, So good. All right. Anyone else want to share a thought, an idea, question? Best practice?
I'm curious about relocation. So, maybe what can the group share as their experiences on what are the things to ask for and look for. First time in my life I'm able to go somewhere, anywhere for a job. I've got, tenured experience. I'm still fairly young, and I don't have a family that I have to uproot. So, I have the ability to go anywhere, which I think puts me in a pretty good spot, but I've never had that. I've always been the trailing spouse. So I went wherever my spouse went for her job, and then didn't have to worry about that. So I'm not really sure what flags I should be looking for and things.
You're talking about the RELA package?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I've been talking too much. So Vern, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I did a lot of relocation in my time, personally, and then from an HR standpoint. Well, the first thing is, does the company have a relocation package? I mean, that you're interviewing with, they may or
Not
may
everybody
not.
does. Yeah.
Right. Not everybody does. They said, you want the job? Well, it's, wherever it is, and then you got to get yourself there. And the cost and everything else is all on your shoulder. At the other end of the spectrum, large companies with the resources. When I worked for Dunkin' Donuts, I mean, we paid for moving, we paid for, temporary housing for someone to find a place to live when they were there, and all of the expenses in terms of traveling back and forth. So it was, and those packages, and I'm dating myself now. I don't know what they cost now, but literally, 30, 40, 50, $60,000. Now, again, that's typically for more senior level positions. And some companies will have tiers. If you're at this level, we'll give you this much to relocate. You really got to find out if the company you're interviewing with does have a relocation policy. And then I guess the question, given where you started, Lee, is where do you want to live? If it's all remote, is there a preference on your part?
Is it all remote, or are they requiring you to be in the office?
It'll be
Yeah.
on site, and I couldn't be happier about that.
I'm sorry, do you say
It's
it's
on
on site?
site.
On
Yeah,
site.
yeah.
Mhm.
I don't enjoy the remote leadership style. I find it's difficult, especially with small, very nimble organizations that I've been, attached to. But Vern, to your point, this is a nonprofit, so they're not gonna,
Yeah.
in my opinion, probably have anything
Mhm.
remotely close to that. But the labor market, which Shira's, referred to many times, and I've been involved with for a long time, if you want talent, you have to figure out a way to grab talent. And so I really don't know what my competition looks like in a scenario like this. So that's where I don't know. First question obviously is there relocation assistance, and
Assistance, yeah,
what does that
yeah.
look like? But
And they typically have, if they're going to have it, they're going to have budgeted for it. All right. So
Yeah.
yes, you can negotiate, but you can certainly ask the recruiter right
Mhm.
now. Say what, if any, relo assistance is there, and they'll probably give you a dollar amount.
okay,
And then when you're doing
Or-
contract negotiations, then you can say, okay, well, I understand you're offering X. Given that the comp you offered is Y, can you sweeten the deal with the
Mhm.
reload? Does that make sense? You can do a little back end.
Right.
Yeah. And again, asking the recruiter up front, it's either going to be a yes or no. We have a real package or we don't. But even so, if they don't have a relocation package and you are the candidate and they make you the offer, again, you could ask them for, is there any way you could provide some relocation assistance, some amount of money?
I
Thank
was
you.
just going to add to that. Definitely, if it's something that can be negotiated, because I've relocated a few times, and I've been very fortunate that there was relocation package. But in one case, I did my homework and I looked at, what was it going to cost to either like ship my car, or drive my car. What was, so I looked at the details
Mhm.
of, if I had a mortgage or a lease, or, I was renting, or all that kind of stuff. So in that particular case, they offered a package, but it wasn't that good. And it was
Mhm.
going to end up where I was going to have to, come out of my pocket a lot more than I wanted to. So I negotiated with them and they actually went up on it. Now, to Burnsport, that was several years ago when
Mhm.
companies had more money, but they actually went up on it, and I ended up not having to come out of pocket, so, and what Shira said, as far as, relocating somewhere, it's a really personal decision. I had to make a decision in my job search. I was going to go down the path of a really good job. And it was, the recruiter kept asking me, like, you really wouldn't consider relocating? And I told him point blank, I said, if it was in a different part of the country, I may consider it. But it was me relocating to Chicago.
Mhm.
I love Chicago. I don't love Chicago in the winter. I'm just at a certain point in my life where I'm like, I'm not going to do that,
Mhm.
And it was kind of hard because it was a great job, but I said, and you had to be on site, and it made sense because it was manufacturing,
Mhm.
but you just have to make that personal decision for yourself. And like I said, if he had said Atlanta or something down south, Florida, I may have been like, oh, okay. But I'm like, Chicago? And like I said, love Chicago, but not in the wintertime. They call it the Windy City for a reason.
I had an interview yesterday with somebody in Chicago, and she said she literally could not make our Zoom call because the internet went down because they were having a snowstorm.
Yeah,
So we had to do it by phone, right? Like, that's just what is there.
and that's, I mean, yeah, and you just have to, make that decision for yourself, whatever is best for you. And like I said, and when I finished talking to him, I was kind of like, did I do the right thing? But I'm like, I don't want to live here. And I had the opportunity to move there some years ago and turned it down. Had nothing to do with the Windy City. I was much younger, but it had to do with the territory I would have been responsible for. So you just really have to look at your personal situation and what's going to be best for you, in this time of your life.
Yeah. All kinds of considerations, but definitely ask up front, just see what if they even offer it at all,
Oh, yeah.
and depending, is it a small association?
I haven't been in
Budget?
the national space before, so I don't know if it's small by national standards or not.
I can tell you if it is. So, what's the budget?
2.5 million.
Yeah, that's small. So they probably have a staff of what, half dozen more? A little more?
17. I was
17.
surprised. Yeah,
17 for 2.5 million. That's
a
okay.
lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. But even so, that 2.5 million is a pretty small budget. So chances are they're not going to have a whole lot in reload.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that doesn't sound like much of a budget to have a relocation package.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Ty?
I think I'd probably asked this question before, but do you still see it trending as an employee's market? And if so, what are the signs? Or maybe that's way off base.
Say that one more time.
Do you see it as an employee's market, employer's market, or?
Oh,
what are
it's
the
a candidate. It's a candidate's market for sure. Oh, 100%, 100% employee. That's what I was going to mention about compensation, because employers are paying hand over fist now. It's a little bit like the housing market. People are paying. People are employers are. Look, I in the last month I have given 3 presentations that I called "Stop Looking." These are presentations to employers, 2 HR groups, and a CEO group, association CEO group. And I called it "Stop Looking for the Unicorn: How to Expand your search in 2022." People are absolutely falling all over themselves because they cannot find good candidates. And so they're paying more, they're having to flex more. It's because the great resignation has basically meant that a lot of people have left their jobs, but they're looking for what they're looking for, right? Candidates are getting more
Right.
particular, and employers are recognizing that. And so it is what they call it, a buyer's market, right? It's absolutely an employee candidate market for sure. And I think it'll stay that way for a while.
My question too is do you see still jobs getting, 200, 300 resumes? Do you still
It
see that?
depends. So it depends. Yes and no.
Okay.
No, in the one hand, if it's a niche kind of a thing. Yes, if it's like a remote job or something where they're open to all kinds of people, then people will flood. But the more niche, whatever the niche means, geography, the skills, the this, the that, it really depends, but a lot of employers are finding that they're not getting many responses at all to their searches. Sonia?
Thank you.
When you say, Shara, that the employers are not finding good candidates, define that, good candidates.
What I mean is that they're not finding their unicorn candidates. Their requirements tend to be so niche and specific that they're not finding the people who are unicorns. And that's why people like me are preaching to them, expand your requirements, get more open-minded. It's not that there aren't good people out there. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that the people that they think that they want, the person with, if you will, 12 out of 10 skills, okay? The impossible person to find, the purple squirrel. That's why they're not finding their people, because you don't happen to check the 50,000 boxes that they have because they're trying to minimize their risk. They don't have time to train. They want what they want. And so the more they expand their requirements, the more they're opening the pool to maybe non-traditional candidates. There's nothing to do with you. It has to do with their requirements.
That's unrealistic because
Absolutely.
I remember when I first started, my first job was at CSC, Computer Science Corporation. I'm sure everybody's heard about that. And we had candidates all the time. There is always, I don't care if it's the president of the organization, there is a ramp up period. So to look, it sounds to me like the people looking for the jobs are inexperienced, because there's going to be a ramp up time frame, no matter what the job is.
Mhm,
And so, as you say, the purple squirrel,
mhm,
to me, that's not realistic.
mhm. I 100% agree with you.
All right, I'm
I
done.
100% agree with you. I do. I have nothing to say. All right, any other questions?
I once saw a black squirrel. If you go to the University of Maryland in College Park, it's the only place I've ever seen them. They got black squirrels there, like jet black squirrels.
It's funny.
Well, in regards to qualifications and you're sure I took your advice, like if it says something in the job description, like you need this, address it up front and say, I can learn this, or I'm willing to learn this.
Yeah.
I said that either usually in the cover letter.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely emphasize transferable skills, whatever you can. Because you never know, somebody might be more open-minded.
So Shira, do you believe that they're actually reading cover letters? If you get a
Only
100
2% of the time.
applications,
Only,
that's what I'm saying.
but
if you're-
some people do. That's the thing, Karen, and because I know the question. To only 2% of the time do they read it, but the 2% who read it actually read it, and you don't know who's reading it. So my opinion is, if you actually want the job, take the time to write the cover letter on the off chance that someone's going to read it. But that also means make sure that your resume stands alone and is customized and is qualified, because if they don't read the cover letter and they only read the resume is what they're going to screen you on.
The cover letter can, and I agree with everything Shira said, the cover letter can only help you. It can help you promote. Now, it might only be, again, the 2%, but if it's those 2% that are reading it, that cover letter that you sent where the other people didn't send a cover letter, it gives you somewhat of a leg up, because you can communicate something else in that cover letter about yourself, why you want the job, which is not always quite as clear on the resume.
Should it be 1 paragraph, 3 paragraphs, like what?
Cover letters?
Yeah.
They should, no, not 1 paragraph. Have an opening paragraph around, thank you for, taking time to consider my application, that kind of thing. Why you're qualified, why you're interested, several paragraphs. So it's an opening, solid paragraph, a solid middle, and then a conclusion, or you could have 2 solid paragraphs in the middle. But more importantly than that, you want to make sure that you are addressing their requirements and your qualifications. Okay, that's very important. It's not even a matter of how long it is, although don't make it more than 1 page. But you've got to specifically address that you're looking for this and I have this. You were looking for this and I have this. To be customized around it, don't try to have just a generic cover letter.
Well, I see people that don't submit cover letters. If there's some place to put them, people might perceive that as, oh, this person's lazy, but also gives you an opportunity to identify the hiring manager and address it directly to them. You've gone the extra mile that some people may not do.
Exactly.
Well, we're
There's
over
actually a
5.
there's actually a program called, I think it's mycoverletter.com,
Hmm.
and it gives you a template. So I've used that, but to Shira's point, I usually do 3 paragraphs. I always, if there's in the application process, if there's a place to submit a cover letter, I always submit it. If it's a situation where I've networked with someone, I definitely submit a cover letter with the resume. But I kind of use that cover letter like the question, tell me about yourself, and like form it like, here's who I am, here's what I've done, here's what I can do for you, and then ask for the job. So I do 3 paragraphs, kind of introduction to who I am, and then here's what I've done here, and here's what I can do for you. So I go through the job description
That's right.
and look at, some of their points in there and, address those points specifically.
Exactly right. Yeah, I'm actually, while we're talking here, I'm just pulling up a sample for you guys. Sorry, give me a second. I just want to find it here. Okay. So here is a sample that I wrote for somebody. It sort of opened with this person was applying for an executive director or president role for an environmental nonprofit. I think it was Rails to Trails. In fact, it was. And so we opened up with something very compelling about how she, used to take walks in Lake Acton Park and all this stuff, right? And then, kind of what she sort of brings to the table, but more specifically, following her key competencies relevant to those emphasized in the search announcement. And then we pulled out the specific competencies that they were looking for, right? And then made sure that we emphasize the different skill sets that she had. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is a table. If you have a table with two columns, one column is your requirements, the other column is my qualifications, and then you just go down the list and list both out. All right. Other comments? We're actually kind of at time here, but I'm happy to take another question. All right, ready to wrap up? Okay, so as per usual, for those of you who'd like to stay on, I'll be offering a short prayer call to pray for your job search and anything else you'd like to bring up. Otherwise, for those who would like to just join us next week, you're certainly welcome to do that. So we will wrap up right here and look forward